The first story is called, I Took a Job Watching Security Cameras on a Remote Island. There's No One Left to Call, by this user. "3 weeks ago, I accepted a contract job that sounded too good to be true. $4,000 a week to monitor a private research facility's security feeds on a remote island. The gig came through a defense subcontractor I've freelanced for. Short-term, solo placement, everything provided. Food, shelter, satellite comms, and complete autonomy. No tourists, no locals, just me and the monitors. I figured it'd be peaceful. They flew me in by helicopter. No pilot chit-chat. Just a 45-minute ride over gray water and endless clouds. When we landed, the facility looked like something from a Cold War movie. Squat concrete buildings, wind-bent trees, and antennas pointed at the sky like dead fingers. The handoff was quick. A clipboard, a list of passwords. A man in a black coat I never saw again. They told me my only job was to watch the cameras. There are 78 feeds in total. Hallways, labs, exterior fences, server rooms. Most are empty. Always have been. The only regular activity is the wind-shaking branches outside, or the slow rotation of fans in the ceiling. I asked once what happened to the staff. The reply came through the satellite phone in a text-only message. You are not authorized for that data. By day 3, I was talking to myself just to hear a voice. By day 5, I started sleeping next to the main console. I stopped checking the calendar on day 8. Then, last night, camera 12 went dark. It is one of the hallway feeds on sublevel 3. I didn't think much of it. The wiring's old, and some of the cameras flicker in bad weather. But when I went to check the breaker box, there was no sublevel 3 listed. Just 2 floors on the diagram, ground and sublevel 1. Still, camera 12 existed. It had always been there. I'd seen that hallway loop for days, an empty, sterile corridor, until it wasn't. At 2:46 a.m., camera 12 came back online, but the hallway was different. The lights were dimmer. The walls had stains on them, smears of something dark, like rust or dried blood. And down at the end of the hallway was a figure, not moving, not walking, just standing, facing the camera. I tried zooming in, but the feed began to blur. The figure didn't react. It just stood there, perfectly still, arms at its sides, like it had been waiting for me to look. I called the emergency contact number. It rang and rang. Then the feed cut to static. Not just camera 12, but all 78 cameras. My console rebooted. When the system came back up, camera 12 was gone, like it had never been part of the grid. This morning, I tried to leave. The helipad is still there, but no radio signal is getting out. The satellite phone just flashes no link. The backup generator is working fine. Everything else is powered, but I'm alone. Worse, the supply crates in the back room, the ones marked for month 2 and month 3, were already open. Empty. I think they knew. I think this was the real job. Not to monitor anything, not to report anything, but to be here. To be alone. I've started hearing humming through the walls, faint mechanical tones like a lullaby through static. They're not coming from the speakers or equipment. They're coming from beneath the floor. And sometimes, when I sleep, I dream of a hallway I've never been in. Dim lights, cracked tile, a figure at the end of it, not moving, just waiting. If you're reading this, if the connection somehow pushed this through, don't reply. Don't come. I think I'm already part of whatever this place is. I think the next person they send will be watching me. The next story is called, My Wife Came Home Late Last Night, but whatever that thing was on my security camera, it sure wasn't her. By this user. I'm writing this at my neighbor's house, where we're currently waiting for the police. I suppose I'll tell them the same thing I told Jack when I came banging on his door this morning. I can't exactly tell them the truth. They wouldn't believe a word of it, and I can't say I blame them. I'm not sure why I'm even telling you, except you may be the only people who would believe me. And I have to tell someone, or I think I'll lose my damn mind. For context, my house sits on a good amount of land that sits next to a large open field to the left of it. There's a few acres of trees beyond the field. A small forest, as my wife likes to say. Our closest neighbor, Jack, lives about 1.5 miles down the road, so we pretty much have the space all to ourselves. Our own little pocket of paradise. Beautiful and safe. Well, that's how I used to think of it. Now I don't feel safe here. Not at all. It's tainted to me now, and I don't know what to do. I've never seen anything like this before. If anyone reading this has ever been in a similar situation, or possibly knows what it could be, and most importantly, what I can do, please reach out. Last spring, Michelle, my wife, thought it would be a good idea to get one of those doorbell cameras. We'd had some things go missing as well as some minor destruction on our property. Nothing too serious. Just a few broken flower pots and some missing lawn ornaments. I tried to tell her it was probably some teenagers from town, just finding something exciting to do, but she wouldn't hear of it. She didn't care about the flower pots or lawn ornaments that much, but she didn't want the situation to escalate into a home invasion. I thought that was a little dramatic, but I knew when to keep my mouth shut. So we bought the camera, and I installed it the same day right up by our porch lights so that we could get a view of the front door and as much of the front of our property in the shot as possible. After 2 days, we finally solved the mystery of the missing lawn decor. You probably already figured it out. If you guessed 2 raccoons, you'd be dead on. It was kinda hilarious watching them scooping up my wife's solar garden lights and carrying them off on 2 legs. Watching them running away with those bright blue bulbs in their hands, like 2 little burglars, was pretty funny. They even looked the part with those masks. Even Michelle couldn't keep a straight face. I wondered what they were doing with all the stolen goods. Maybe sprucing up their digs out in the forest. Michelle started putting out bowls of cat kibble, and amazingly the thievery stopped. We still kept the camera up though. Turns out it would come in handy. Michelle has been out of town for work for the last 4 days. She was supposed to be home last night around dinner, but called to tell me the plane had been delayed and she wouldn't be home until 4 a.m. or later. I told her I loved her and I'd see her when she came home. And that was that. It was an average night, nothing out of the ordinary. I straightened up the house so she wouldn't come home to a disaster. I made some soup for dinner and fed the cat. After, me and Mona curled up on the couch together, me watching TV while she purred on my chest. I went to sleep around 2 a.m. I'd only slept a little over an hour before I was woken up by an alert on my phone. A notification for the security camera. Now it wasn't unusual to get an alert, especially late at night. It was always some little critter, a fox or raccoon. But I grabbed my phone off my nightstand to check anyway. It was well after 2, and my immediate thought was that Michelle had gotten home earlier than she thought she would. I laid there listening for the sound of Michelle letting herself in, but it never came. Only silence. I groaned, figuring she'd forgotten her keys. Wouldn't be the first time. She was notorious for leaving them behind. Probably forgot them at the hotel or airport. I didn't jump right up to check though, as I still hadn't heard her knock. So I opened the app and pulled up the live feed. Michelle was standing on the front porch, just staring at the door. I sat up, about to go let her in, when something stopped me. It was her face. She was smiling. Not just any smile, but one that I'd never seen before. A weird, thin-lipped grin that stretched the width of her face. Like someone trying to show off all of their teeth. She stayed that way for a long moment, like a creepy mannequin. After a minute, Her lips slowly puckered out into a pout, as though she were an upset toddler. She held that expression for a minute, then her lips dropped downwards, and a deep-set frown etched across her forehead. I sat there in bed, staring at my wife practicing different facial expressions, as if she were brand new at such a concept. It was bizarre and a little unsettling. She continued to go through each movement, seeming to take her time with each one. Smile, pout, frown, repeat. After watching her for nearly 15 minutes, I finally recovered from my shock and confusion and pressed the intercom. "Babe, what on earth are you doing?" I said. Her head snapped towards the camera, looking up at it with wide eyes. It was as if she had forgotten the camera was even there. Her mouth was partially hanging open on one side, caught between a smile and a frown. She didn't answer me, only continued to stare, her face frozen in that disturbing look. I waited for a long moment, unsure how to proceed. The longer I watched her, the more I realized just how strange she looked. I didn't notice at first, being half asleep, but now that I was wide awake, it was so obvious that I wondered how I could have not noticed immediately. For starters, she seemed much taller. The top of her head came to just over the little rod we used to hang our different holiday flags, the one I have to stand on my tiptoes to be able to reach. That wasn't the only odd thing about her. Her arms were much too long, hanging down past her knees. Even her face was different. It resembled her, enough that it was instantly noticeable, but when I really looked, I could see that her face seemed more narrow, as if it had been stretched from the top of her head to her jaw, and the skin looked too tight, as if it were 2 sizes too small, the bones underneath pushing hard against the flesh. I was beginning to panic at that point. I didn't know if she'd been in some horrible accident or what, but I knew something was very wrong with her. "Honey, are you hurt?" I asked, my voice shaking. In response to my question, Michelle stamped her foot down on the porch, hard, shaking her head. Before I could say anything else, she reached out and took hold of the doorknob and jiggled it fiercely. I was instantly filled with dread at the mere thought of her getting in. "I'm not letting you inside," I said quickly. I could hear her jiggling the knob frantically, her face still staring up at the camera. She finally let go after a few minutes and made a sound almost like laughing. The sound of it made my skin crawl. "I'm home," she said. Her voice, like her face, was similar, but not a complete match. It went from nasally to almost baby-like. "I'm home. Open the door?" I almost closed the app and called 911 right then and there, but I'll admit I was afraid my wife was having some sort of medical emergency. "Maybe I should call for help," I said. She shook her head again, her long hair whipping from side to side. Then something happened, and that image will stick with me for the rest of my life. Michelle, or the thing that was desperately trying to be her, seemed to stretch right in front of my eyes. Her torso thinned out and grew so that her head slid against the ceiling. Its skin looked so tight that I could actually hear it pulling, wobbling, and rubber-like. It had obvious trouble staying on 2 feet, but it managed. It tried to close its mouth, but it couldn't do it completely, and its jaw just sort of hung there against its chest. "I'm calling the police," I shouted, fear overwhelming me. The moment the words left my mouth, her face twisted in a look of pure hatred. It was like I could feel it radiating through the screen. I'd never seen such hate and rage in my life, certainly not on my wife's face. Quick as a flash, she dropped down onto the porch and crawled down the steps and onto the lawn. I watched in horror as she crawled towards the field, her long arms bent at sickening angles. She reached the edge of the field and disappeared in the tall grass. I sat watching the screen, my heart racing. I was too afraid to look away even for a moment. After an hour without seeing her again, I finally felt safe enough to set the phone down and try to sleep. I thought about calling my wife, but part of me was too scared I'd hear that poor imitation on the other end. I fell into a restless sleep sometime later. I didn't sleep long before my phone woke me again. Another notification. I pulled up the app and held my breath, terrified at what I'd see. When the feed came up, I knew right away that I was looking at my wife. Relief flooded my body. She was standing on the porch, her suitcase at her feet, as she rummaged through her purse, probably searching for her keys. "Lost your keys again?" I said, pressing the intercom. She jumped at the sound of my voice, almost dropping her purse. "You're up," she said, smiling. "Looks like I have lost my keys. Mind letting me in?" she said, batting her eyes up at the camera. I couldn't help but smile. She always had a way of making me feel completely at ease, even after witnessing a nightmare just hours prior. "I suppose I wouldn't be a very good husband if I let you sleep on the porch all night," I teased. She grinned up at me, and I told her to hang on. I sat up and slipped on my slippers and got to my feet. That's when I caught some movement on the screen. Far off in the field, a head rose up from the grass, standing tall on a neck much too long to come from anything human. A whimper escaped my lips, and I nearly dropped my phone. I was glued to the floor, unable to look away from that thing watching my house. The head bobbed slightly, then the body rose upwards to meet the head, like a slinky sliding back in position. It stood in the field watching. Then, to my terror, it began shuffling quickly towards the house on jerky legs. I couldn't help but scream. It was coming for my wife, and it was coming fast, even with its unstable gait. I ran down the hall, dropping my phone in the process, skipping steps as I raced down them. I lost my footing when I hit the bottom and skidded across the front hall, colliding into the front door. I was screaming incoherently, fumbling with the locks. I could hear my wife's concerned voice, asking me what was wrong. Then, just as I was working to flip the deadbolt, I heard her scream, this time in pure fear. I finally managed to flip the deadbolt and rip the door open, taking a handful of her jacket and yanking her inside, locking the door behind her. I leaned against the door, panting hard. I heard a muffled thump on the porch, but then it was quiet. My wife was scared, pale, and nearly in tears. She refused to talk about what she'd seen and didn't want to see the footage of the thing on our porch. I let her get some sleep, assuring her that the house was secure. I stayed up, checking the windows and the live feed. I watched the field for any sign of that thing, but it seemed like it was gone. Soon after Michelle went to sleep, I decided to look at the video to see if I could tell where it went off to. I was scared to see it again. Maybe that's why I waited. I pulled up the video and watched that thing shambling across the field towards my house, its long arms outstretched and a look of longing on its face. Its smile was terrible the closer it got. I saw my wife on the screen growing worried as she heard me screaming through the house, totally unaware of the danger she was in, of the thing that was just mere feet behind her. I could barely make it through the entire video, watching it get closer and closer. Just as it reached the porch, I could hear myself trying to unlock the door. But seconds before I pulled it open, those long arms reached out, gripping my wife by her shoulders and ripping her backwards off the porch, my wife able to scream only once. I didn't see what it did with her, but I did see it step up onto the porch, positioning itself in front of the door, its limbs adjusting to a more human appearance. Just before my hand shot out to pull it inside, that thing grinned up at the camera, its lips stretched impossibly wide. For a moment, I almost didn't believe it. It was as if my brain wouldn't allow it. But as I stood in the hallway, attempting to process what I'd seen and what that meant, I heard the unmistakable sound of something shuffling up behind me. I ran then. I didn't look behind me. I didn't want to see what I knew I would see, something eerily similar to my wife, with gangly limbs and skin stretched taut over sharp bones. I knew if I looked back my mind would snap and I'd never recover. I ran faster than I ever have, tearing off out of the house and down the road, too terrified To look back even once, sure I'd see those long arms desperately reaching for me. I made it to my neighbor's house and pounded on the door. I told him that there was an intruder. I didn't know what else to say. He'd never believe the truth. We went back to my house armed with Jack's rifle, but of course the house was empty. We couldn't find Michelle either. All we found were what looked like drag marks through my lawn, running right through the field. I didn't have to look at the video to know what made those tracks. We searched the field and the woods, but didn't find much other than some strands of hair that looked an awful lot like Michelle's. The hair was high up on a branch, in a tree that would be extremely difficult to climb. Jack said it must have been a bird that had done it. Flew the hair up there for nesting material. I guess he didn't see the blood splatter along the trunk. We eventually went back to Jack's place and called the police. Jack thought it best. I agreed, but I know it won't make much of a difference. Michelle is long gone by now. I just hope she didn't suffer. The guilt I feel for not saving her, for not knowing that thing wasn't my wife, is so profound it aches to breathe. I deleted the videos. I couldn't bear to watch them again. I think my mind would have broke completely if I had. The police are here, finally done with their search of the woods. I guess I'll have to go through the motions. It's not like I have any other choice. Not unless I want to spend the rest of my days in a padded room. Although considering the alternative, it's not a bad idea. If you have any experience with this, or have any clue what I should do if it comes back, please let me know. I have a strong suspicion that it will be back, and God knows who it'll look like then. Because Jack's been acting a bit jittery ever since we came back from the woods, and it may just be my imagination, brought on by stress and grief. But Jack's skin seems to be stretched a little too thin. The next story is called Security Cameras by this user. I currently work for a small family-run wholesaling business. Our office has a main area that opens up into 4 other rooms. 2 doors on the left about 30 feet apart, separated by a large table. A large door straight back, and a door to the right for the bathroom. It's a good job, and most of the time I work alone in the office, getting orders ready, which is always nice since I can just play my music and get my work done at my own pace. Fairly recently, my boss decided to install several security cameras since he was planning on bringing extra employees in, and he's a bit worried about theft. This didn't bother me at all, since he was letting me set everything up and monitor the footage. Everything was going fine for the first couple days until this morning. While I was working, I would hear strange scratching noise like an animal running across the carpet. I didn't pay it any mind since I have a small rodent problem at my house, and the noise reminded me of a mouse or rat. I decided I'd just bring some traps from home the next day to try and get rid of it. My day dragged on with little occurrence until I began closing up. When I began my closing routine of going room to room and turning off all the lights and closing the doors, I heard a couple loud popping noises behind me. I wasn't sure what this could have been, but I simply attributed it to a bulb going out as I turned the lights off. I then headed to the bathroom before locking up and leaving for the night. When I got home from work, I remembered I hadn't tried out the software I set up on my laptop, which allowed me to view the camera's footage, and I thought I might be able to catch a glimpse of the mouse in the office. I got my laptop ready and went to sit down, but before I could, I heard that damn skittering noise coming from my living room. I walked into the living room, trying to find the source, and made a mental note of setting up more mouse traps sooner than intended. I sighed and went back into my kitchen. I sat down at the table with my laptop, ready to watch the day's footage. The first few hours weren't too exciting, although it's strange watching yourself go about your day when you're alone. I fast-forwarded the video and finally caught a glimpse of something about 3 hours into my day. When I watched the footage, I noticed that in one of the back rooms, a large object appeared to skitter past the doorway. I kept trying to re-watch it, but I couldn't be sure. It looked much bigger than a mouse, but I just continued the footage. And then I saw it. A face was staring out of the room. The face was low to the ground, just barely visible from the bottom right corner of the doorway. I could barely move as I watched. Whoever it was had to be crawling on all fours to be that low to the ground. It was hard to make out many features, but I could see a large grin stretching from ear to ear as it watched me from the room. I never even saw it while I was working. I even walked into that room to grab product. It seemed to stay still until I began closing up for the day. When I went into the room and turned the light off, it began to follow me. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't even pause the video because I just couldn't handle staring at that thing much longer. Her limbs jutted out at unnatural angles. It began to move forward. In a jerky fashion, it stood up and its limbs started snapping back into place. I watched in horror as I realized that this creature was the source of the popping noise I had heard. The thing appeared to be a small woman wearing a filthy, tattered dress. Her hands were abnormally long and ended in small, slender fingers tipped with sharp claws. Her face was sunken in. The eyes were just two empty pits caked with dried blood. But the worst part was her mouth. It was way too large to have ever been human. When she grinned, I could see hundreds of tiny needle-shaped teeth. I couldn't stop staring at that awful grin. I watched myself walk into the bathroom and close the door. As I closed the door, the thing approached. It shot from the room to the bathroom door. So quickly, the camera was barely able to keep up. It stood in front of the door and just stared, waiting for me to come out. It stood there for a couple minutes before it slowly turned toward the camera. And within a blink of an eye, its entire face took up the entire screen. I screamed and slammed my laptop shut. When I finally got the courage to open it back up, the screen was completely black. My laptop had gone into sleep mode, and all I could see was my reflection in the computer screen. As I started to breathe a sigh of relief, my breath was caught in my throat as I heard the skittering noise come to a stop behind my chair. I sat frozen in horror, watching through the reflection of the computer as the popping noises began and another face became visible over my shoulder, grinning from ear to ear. Thank you for watching, and remember, stories are just echoes. What you hear depends on how closely you listen.